The underpinning of this is really on the inside of you. It's actually the microbiome. And I hope that by now, because I know I've been talking about this for a couple of years, hopefully everyone has heard about the microbiome, but I'll describe it for you very briefly, just so people know that most of your cell count is actually not, um, it's actually not human. Most of it is actually bacteria and fungi and one-celled viruses, all of these other organisms. And these actually control what's happening between everywhere, between your toes and between your teeth. There's a microbiome everywhere, and it's doing good things for you or bad things for you. And your digestion, eliminating toxins, all of that is coming from the gut microbiome, the billions and trillions of bacteria that you have. Now, you'll see a lot of people taking probiotics, and the FDA has approved some of them. We've had data for quite a while that Clostridium difficile, very difficult to treat diarrhea that happens after your microbiome gets um, uh, overwhelmed by antibiotics because of some illness. The antibiotics saved your life, but they give you this diarrheal illness. And fecal transplants typically from a spouse works really well to repopulate and get the C. diff to go back and be in more reasonable numbers. Exercise works, but the fact of the matter is a prebiotic is the one thing that consistently works. So I'm just going to run through the risk factors with you. Hypertension, very clearly, huge research projects showing that hypertension, a high elevation in your blood pressure is due to which kind of bacteria you have in your GI tract. And sure, there are genes and environmental and stress and all kinds of things, but fix the bacteria and the blood pressure will go down. How about cholesterol? Most of the people on this call, including me a couple of years ago, had no idea that there was such a thing as caprostanol. We'd all heard of cholesterol, but caprostanol is what happens when you have a cholesterol dehydrogenase enzyme and you metabolize degrade your cholesterol into caprostanol. Caprostanol does not go into arteries, doesn't even get reabsorbed. It goes out in the stool. And so we all thought that our dietary cholesterol reduction, when you went on a whole food plant-based diet, eliminating cholesterol ingestion, was going to be the main reason that your cholesterol went down. Well, it turns out that that was only part of it. The rest of it is that when you stop eating the decaying flesh, you're getting bacteria that are more likely to metabolize the cholesterol and make things better. And so that's the cholesterol story that we should make sure that everybody knows. Whole food plant-based diet is more than just reduction of ingested cholesterol. How about diabetes? We have a lot of data that really characterizes exactly the kinds of things that happen at a very biochemical level. How about your sugar and your insulin levels? How about your inflammation, fatty acids? How much of when the gut permeability, when you eat food, are you going to absorb a lot of it, or is it going to go out in the stool, the calories that you eat? Guess what? It depends on the bacteria that you have. So the ones in blue do good things for you. The ones in red do bad things. And so the same thing is true of obesity, and they're very much related. That is, the more lipoprotein synthase that you have, LPS, you end up with more inflammation and more absorption and feeding your fat cells and making them larger. All of that happens because of the microbiome. And so what we really need to do is change to a whole food plant-based diet so we can stop the appetite changes. It's not sure that everyone has heard it, but hopefully you have, that people who are overweight are not overweight because they're overeating. They're overeating because they're overweight. It's a reverse of what we thought. And so it's the fat cells themselves, the liver, these are all putting out hormones that make people and the brain is sensitive to them, increasing the appetite so that the caloric intake goes up. So if you could stop all of this endocrine effects, and the main way to do that is to change the bacteria in the GI tract, then you can actually affect the person's weight. How long does it take? Well, going vegetarian, going vegan changes your microbiome in just a few weeks. And it will actually start to erode all of the tendency to have all of these cardiovascular risk. Now, there's one more part of the microbiome that I have to talk about. If you haven't heard of it, it's the TMAO, trimethylamine N oxide, giving credit to Stan Hazen's group at Cleveland Clinic. And there is an assay. I know very few people have had their TMAO level measured, and maybe it isn't really necessary, particularly in a group of people who are plant-based. It probably isn't as important as getting your LP little a, which is genetic, and your it's CRP level done. But if you're not plant-based, and I know not say 199 of you, I'm sure there's somebody on there who's plant-based inquisitive, or they're being put into the talk by their spouse. Oh, it's 200 of you now. There you go. Well, I'm hoping that if you are still eating animal products, listen to this and then get your TMAO level done. This is New England Journal of Medicine about 10 years ago, showing very clearly that animal products create this trimethylamine N oxide through the gut metabolism. And what they showed is that this over the ensuing decade, that the TMAO is related to so many bad things that happen to the body that we need to actually try to make sure that this does not go up. And the way to do that is to fix the microbiome and what the microbiome sees in terms of phosphatidylcholine, choline, beta-ine, creatine. All of them end up in this pathway, making trimethylamine and then trimethylamine N oxide. What they showed, interestingly, is that you could get away with white meat if you just ditch the red meat. Now, that doesn't sound good to the whole food plant-based, and there are other issues like the cholesterol. But I will show you that the data is actually very clear that Stan Hazen's group is right about that the TMAO level goes up more when you're eating red meat. And this is very much supported by the fact that red meat is more dangerous than other types of animal protein, particularly when it's processed. Now, it turns out that if you do a intervention like plant-based meats, you will reduce the TMAO level within just a few weeks. I can't mention the TMAO without mentioning what happens. It makes you more likely to be diabetic. It makes you more likely to have heart attack, stroke, or death if you have a high level in your bloodstream, that blue graph up there. If you had heart failure, it increases the likelihood that you die of your heart failure if your TMAO level is high. And all of this is very consistent with the Harvard group that was saying for over a decade now that red meat consumption leads to mortality, that it's not just cardiovascular, it's cancer as well, that it's a dose related, meaning the more you eat, the more you die. And that the main mechanism is actually developing coronary heart disease, which has been the leading killer of Americans since 1918, and COVID did not take it out, believe it or not. And that processed red meat, that is bacon, sausage, hot dogs, lunch meat, that is cold cuts, they act, and ham, those are actually twice as lethal as red meat. And so there is a clear-cut relationship between coronary heart disease and red meat because of it. And the interesting thing that I'm going to throw in here, everyone's I'm going to get a couple of tangents, and this is an important tangent, that this is data that's been out there for a while from the Harvard School of Public Health, that anything you do to replace red meat decreases your death rate. And so how do you read a hazard ratio? For those of you who are not statisticians in there, 0.9, that would be a 10% decrease. 0.67, 33% decrease, okay? So you notice that there is one outlier here, source of protein, and that is fish. This was one of the first times ever that fish was deemed more dangerous than red meat. Increased by 6%, did not reach statistical significance, so you can't take it to the bank and say for sure, but that is going in the wrong direction, okay? As opposed to soy, which is dramatically, if you, every time someone stops eating red meat and eats soy, they're basically saving their life tremendously.